This is Nye McGee with EURweb.com. Arif, thank you for giving me your time today to speak about this new documentary, Chris Hemsworth, A Road Trip to Remember. And as a producer on this project, what was it about Chris and Craig's father-son dynamic that made you believe this story needed to be told?
Um, well, what's amazing about we've I've got to know Chris over the last few years because I made the first series of Limitless with him, which was 6 episodes. I made a special, a one-off Shark Beach, which was a more of a natural history film, and then we made another 4 films, 3 films for the main Limitless series that went out in August, and also this is a one-off. So over that time, I've got to know Chris well enough to know that one of his quite remarkable qualities on screen is his openness and honestness, and honesty. He's the guy you see is the guy on screen. There's no performance there. It's Chris as himself, and so we knew that Chris would be open to the experience of sharing the film and the journey with his father. And Craig is his son's father. He's everything that Chris is. He's actually a really lovely, remarkable man. So once we'd had a chance to meet with him and he trusted us with the process, we knew that the two of them together would be themselves, and that we would see intimacy and a family dynamic there that felt very rare and very real. So I don't think any of us had a doubt about the dynamic. I think we didn't know when we started the film what path it would take because it was in most respects an observational documentary, and there are moments in the film that we didn't expect for us to see. There are moments where Craig is quite vulnerable. Um, and because he has early onset Alzheimer's, most of the time you wouldn't know. It's just those moments. And we didn't know and we didn't need to see those moments. But when they happened, both Craig and Kristen Leone, Craig's wife, Chris's mum, they were like, that's okay, you can film it and we can make a judgment as to how, if we're comfortable with the world seeing this stuff. And they were, because actually they really believe that they have a platform as a family in the public eye, to share their experiences so that people relate and say it's not just me, and also to offer up some ways in which that don't involve drugs, that don't involve expensive treatments, that just involve behavior, which is spending time with your loved ones, if they're living with dementia, remembering the past, engaging them in the present. Um, you know, Connection, as we say in the film, is the most powerful drug that you can give, and that message is a really important one, and one that Chris and Craig and Leonie and the rest of the Hemsworth family want people to hear.
Now, during the road trip, what moments stood out to you as clear examples of how connection or nostalgia can help support cognitive health?
Hmm. Um, well, ultimately it's a subjective judge. It's both Craig and Chris felt the experience was a positive of one for them. We didn't do any, there are no sort of MRI scans or any kind of, if you like, data that you can find that shows that what Craig experienced or what Chris did necessarily improves, um, or in some way impacts Craig's dementia beyond what's reported and what a lot of the science that people like Dr. Suraj Samtani have done, which is much more kind of evidence-based and laboratory-based. And what we do find is that if you plot the trajectory of people who have constant connection, social connection, or are engaging in memories of the past and reminiscence therapy, you definitely see a relative improvement, if you like, or a relative slower decline in the signs of dementia. So that for us was very clear. We had some interventions that are science-backed that we know would make a big difference. And ultimately, Chris and Craig felt that it did for them. And as Chris says, he doesn't know what the future holds, but he knows that that experience in that moment was something that really did make a difference for his dad. And that's what Craig said as well. Um, and I think it's important to recognize that the film works on multiple levels. So you've obviously got the story of, if you like, Chris and Craig coming to terms with, Craig's dementia, but also you have a family returning to their roots, um, which by itself is an extraordinary story, um, in terms of the father-son dynamic. And traveling back to Bullman, which is, it would be fair to say a pretty unlikely place for the Hemsworth clan to have spent such a formative years. I mean, all of that, I think, just added meaning and layers to our story. So it was a real gift to us as storytellers and filmmakers that Chris and his family were prepared to let us film that journey. It was a journey that Chris wanted to take with his dad, and it for us it felt like a gift as storytellers.
Some of the most intimate moments were captured by Chris himself. What was your approach to integrating that self-shot footage kind of seamlessly?
Mhm. Well, so the director Tom Barber-Might, brilliant director. One of the ideas that we were kicking around was this idea that Chris would shoot his own movie because one of the, and we don't say this in the film, but at one point there was a voiceover line that sort of said that the film that Chris was shooting is in itself reminiscence therapy because they can look back at the video and review it. But we kind of thought that actually that was really obvious. So we don't say that explicitly. But the idea was that Chris was capturing that for as part of their reminiscence therapy. And so when we set that idea up at the very top of the film, and you see Chris sort of asking his dad to film him while he does the opening credit sequence, as the audience members that there will be these moments of self-shot. So integrating them was relatively easy. I mean, stylistically, it's obviously slightly jarring, but I think the audience understood and bought into the fact that there were going to be these moments. And there were, look, a lot of moments were captured that was some of the most powerful were in front of our main cameras. There's two scenes, which we had no idea how they would play out. I mean, one of them, there's a scene in which he forgets who he's with, without giving too much away. But there's a moment where he's, where you can really see the dementia and the forgetfulness. And we had no idea that that was going to happen. And that was while we were shooting with the main cameras. That wasn't Chris. And similarly, there's a scene where the two of them, father and son, around a campfire, which is incredibly powerful and moving. And that again was with the main cameras, but they'd sort of by that point screened them out, and they were really in the moment. It was very real. So those are the moments, to go back to your earlier question. There were moments like that which we hadn't planned for, which were were really the high points for me in the film.
What do you hope audiences take away about dementia, and how do you hope this documentary might shift the conversation around brain health?
Mm. Well, look, we in the series, in Limitless as a series, we have looked at ways in which you can improve your health and wellness and longevity, which don't require drugs and expensive treatments. That's our guiding principle. So, be it, I don't know, box breathing or cold showers or whatever it happens to be, or learning a new skill, we know that that improves learning new to play a musical instrument. Okay, you could argue there's some investment in buying an instrument, but fundamentally you're not paying a lot of money for a lot of drugs over a long period of time. So, we are always focused as a series on things that anyone can do. And that was the big lesson or the big message from the interventions that you see. There's the reminiscence therapy, which is, in a sense, nostalgia therapy. And then there's the social connections and making sure that you talk and you spend time with people. So those messages we wanted to put across. And then I think there's a real relatability for those people who are dealing with this, to see that in somebody as seemingly famous and with such a perfect life as Chris. And ultimately, we want people to come away feeling that connecting with their loved ones, and just after the film finishes, just reaching for that phone and pressing contacts and speaking to your father or your son or your daughter, whatever it happens to be. But that, reaching out to loved ones is something that's very easy to do and exponentially beneficial to everyone.